The thing that I took away from dope, and I think this is probably the benefit of getting into it so early instead of staying in patrol for, a significant amount of time, is I learned real quick that the world isn't black and white. Drug dealers, drug users, the drug world, crime, it's not cut and dry. It's not, well, you did it and you shouldn't have done it and now you're going to jail for it. When you work dope, especially when you are working with a lot of different informants and sources, and if you do some undercover stuff, you start to realize the human element in all of this, and you realize that there's a lot of gray area. It's not what you just, from an outsider's perspective, they see X, Y, Z, and that means this should happen. When you're in it, it's not that cut and dry, you know. So that was my biggest takeaway.
Okay, new interview today. And can you introduce yourself for me, please?
My name is Matt Reimer, and I don't know what else you want to know reference to that.
Okay, Matt.
Talk about how we know each other.
Let's start from the beginning. Can you tell me a little bit about growing up, family life, where you grew up, and was there anything growing up that led you into law enforcement?
Yeah, so I was born and raised here in Boise. My parents still live here. I have a younger sister that also lives here with her daughter. Graduated from Bora High School and went to Boise State, got my degree in criminal justice. I kind of knew at an early age that I wanted to work as a police officer. As far as catalysts that got me into wanting to do do that type of industry, my family battled drug addiction for a long time. My dad just recently passed away a year ago from methamphetamine and fentanyl. He did 15 years federal time when I was younger for manufacturing methamphetamine, got in a gun charge. My uncle died of heroin. The litany list goes on and on. I was raised by my mom and my stepdad, who I actually consider my father, but my real dad, that whole line of family, is the one that was involved in the drug world, I guess you would say. And I remember something. I knew that I wanted to do law enforcement as a young kid, but I was 14. We had snuck out of the house to go to some girl's house, and just me and a buddy. And I was on rollerblades and he was on my bike. This is how dumb we are. We're living, we're going to this house that's 5 miles away. And I'm rollerblading up Overland, going up the hill past Orchard. And it's a major thoroughfare and it's like midnight. So obviously we're just dumb kids not trying to hide and sneak. We're just thinking we're going to get there real quick. Well, there were some cops sitting up there, Boise PD. They'd flashed their spotlight on us and they were like, hey, it's past curfew. You guys need to head home over their loudspeaker. So when they were a ways away, I waved to him and acknowledged him like, okay, yeah, we need to turn around and go home because I'm shitting my pants at this point. And they all of a sudden pull up. Well, he thought I had flipped him off. And so I'm explaining to him what we're doing. And he asked who my dad was. He asked me what my parents' names were. And so I gave my mom's name and then I gave him my real dad's name. And they both kind of chuckled and laughed. And they were like, oh, yeah, we know who he is. And that was my father, Dennis, who was involved in the drug world. And I knew right then that I didn't want to go down the same path as him. And I remember having a conversation with my mom when I was younger. And she had asked me, she goes, so do you want Ken, my stepdad, do you want him to adopt you and you can take on his last name? And even at a young age, I don't remember how old I was, but I was super young. I said, no, I want to keep my last name because I want to bring something good to that line and that last name instead of drug use and drug overdoses and drug dealing and alcoholism and all the things that come associated with that. And that was the catalyst. I knew at a young age. I mean, I had a really strong mom who raised me really well, but I could take two different paths. I could go the path of my father, or I could go the opposite direction. And the handful of times that I had seen my dad, or even been allowed to be around him, because obviously there was a lot of conversations that was occurring in the background between my mom and him. I remember watching him sit there and use drugs in front of me, or, have his floozy women come in there and he would, disappear off into the back room for 2 hours while I'm just sitting on the couch. And I didn't care because I was just happy to finally see him because I never got to see him or be around him. But I remember seeing all that stuff, and then I would go home and tell my mom. And then ultimately I just ended up not seeing her. And now putting two and two together, she put the kibosh on it at that point. She was like, if you can't act right, behave, then I'm not going to let you see him. And that would be the catalyst. I mean, that was it.
Do you remember how old you were? You said you were fairly young, but do you remember how old you were when you made that decision to go, no, I'm gonna keep my dad's last name, and I'm gonna make a difference with that last name?
It was early teenage years.
Okay.
It was early teenage years.
Okay.
I don't remember the exact age, but I remember the conversation vividly. So.
Okay. So when do you graduate from BSU?
I graduated from BSU in 2004.
2004. And what happens? What's the process? Do you start doing a shotgun approach where you're trying to get hired with a whole bunch of different agencies, or how does that work?
Yeah. So prior to graduating, they had a career fair at Boise State, and Snohomish County Sheriff's Department in Washington had sent some recruiters down there and started talking about what they pay and all that. And so before I had even finished, I went down and tested at Snohomish County. I had no clue what I was walking into, what the process was going to be, or anything like that. So I drive all the way down there and show up. I actually had a cousin that lived there, so I stayed with him. And show up to the physical test, and you had to do, I think it was like 25 push-ups or 20 push-ups as part of the physical test. I couldn't do 25 push-ups. I could not get the push-ups. I had shown up and gone through this whole process and failed the push-ups test. And I was like, wow, okay. I got some work to do apparently if I can't do 20 push-ups. Like, that was a real shot to my ego. So I go back home. And I'm like, all right, now I got this thing figured out, right? So I apply again down there, but this time I applied for King County Sheriff's Department. And I was applying for Washington because at the time they were paying, I don't remember what the hourly pay rate was, but it seemed like a lot to me at the time. So I go down there again, and this time I trained before I went and tested, and did all the physical stuff, no problem or whatever. And then I go to take the written test. And I remember they would, at the beginning of the test, they showed us 3 or 4 mug shots or something of probably fake people or whatever, but it had their identifiers, whether they had tattoos, a little bit of a criminal history, their height, weight, eye color, all that stuff, right? And they flash to you and you get to look at it for a few minutes, and then you go into the written test portion. And I get through the written test portion, and at the end of the test is a whole section of questions on the mug shots that they showed you at the beginning. What was this person's height? What was this person's weight? Or who had the burglary on their criminal history or whatever it was? And keep in mind, I'm a 20-year-old kid at this point, and I'm nervous as shit, sweating like crazy, trying to go through this whole process. Well, needless to say, I didn't pass that written test going through that. So I go back home, and at this point, my ex-wife, now ex-wife, she was pregnant with my first son, and I was like, all right, I gotta finish school. I gotta get this done. And so I ended up graduating when I turned 21. And I was just bartending and waiting tables on the side, and I got on with juvenile probation with Ada County.
Hmm.
I was working in the detention center part-time and then transitioned into the probation department.
What year was it when you started with juvenile?
It would have been probably 2019, 2020.
Okay.
It was just part-time, and I was still bartending and stuff and doing all that.
Okay.
And once I got the probation officer position, I worked in drug court. I initially had a sex offender caseload, and then I went in and was the probation officer for drug court and learned that whole drug court process.
Wait, hold on just a minute, Matt. So I think you said you started with Nampa PD, and we'll get to that in 2006, but I think you just said 2019 with
or not 20. No, okay, so no, I take that. So I started it. Okay, backtrack on that. Okay, so I started with Nampa PD in 2006. So it would have been 2003.
Okay, got
2003
it.
is when I started with Ada County, kind of going through that whole process and whatnot. Sorry.
Okay, so what did you both for the juvenile as well as the adult probation? What did you do? What was your day to day?
So I didn't do adult probation. I just did the juvenile probation, and my day to day on it was literally visits, home visits,
Okay.
meet with the parents, meet with the kids, making sure that they're abiding by the terms and conditions of their release. And then once I transitioned from that sex offender caseload, because it was too hard. I couldn't do the sex offender caseload because you're shoveling shit on a beach. You know, these kids have these major issues, and they have these major issues because they come from families that have major issues. And if they're not pulled out of that, you're not really fixing anything or doing anything. Right? These are learned behaviors from adults that are around them. And I would take it home. I would just carry it. You know, I would be in tears, like, this kid is doing this or whatever. And I'd be venting to my in-laws about it and my parents. And I'm just like, I don't know what to do. And so then I ended up moving into the drug court. And my day-to-day was I would attend the drug court meetings and, work with those kids. And I really, really enjoyed that side of it. It was almost like I had an understanding. I knew these kids were addicted to methamphetamine and they were doing the things, but they weren't bad kids. They just were in bad situations and bad circumstances. There's a handful of bad apples out there that are just bad apples. So I did that, but I knew that while I was working that, I started applying with law enforcement agencies here. And I applied for a law enforcement, Albuquerque Police Department, because I had some friends that lived down there. And that was actually the first place that I was hired on.
But you didn't ever work there though, right?
No, I did for about 5 minutes. The journey to become a cop was a long and arduous one, and I'm surprised I lasted as long as I did. So I had my youngest son, and I knew that I knew I wanted to be in law enforcement here with BPD or Nampa or someplace, but I couldn't because I had smoked weed. I had smoked weed when I was in college. One time on a road trip to Canada with a couple of buddies, and it was kind of one of those deals where they were like, because I had promised them a long time ago, as a dumb kid, I'm like, all right, last time I ever do it, I'll do it with you guys, but that's it. I said I can't. So I didn't meet the 3-year time. I think it was a 3-year or 5-year time requirement that law enforcement local would, since your last use of marijuana. But Albuquerque didn't have that time frame. So my goal was, okay, I'm going to put in with Albuquerque. I'll try to get on with them, and then I will try to lateral over back here. And I knew it was going to be hard because I just had a baby. And we had a conversation about everything, and I was like, look, this is just going to be short term. Like, I'm going to go do this. I'll get on, and then I should be able to get on pretty easily here somewhere. So I applied with them. I went through the psych test. I went through the whole rigmarole of everything. And it was interesting because they flew me down there. And it's different when they bring out-of-state candidates in that sense, because they try to go bang, bang, bang through all the different, your physical tests, your written tests, your interviews, your oral boards, your psych tests. They move you through the process relatively quick because they know you're from out of town. And I remember the psych test, they had asked me, or not psych, uh, no, the polygraph. The polygraph, they only asked me 4 questions on the polygraph. Um, they asked me if did I intentionally falsify anything on my application? Did I intentionally falsify anything about my criminal history? Did I falsify anything about my drug use history? And I think the other one was my work history. And so I'd finished everything, and I remember walking around downtown Albuquerque just kind of waiting for this phone call from this investigator as he's giving me the results of everything. He calls me back and he goes, "So everything looks good, but something popped up on the polygraph." And I go, "Okay, well, what was that?" And he goes, "It's coming back inconclusive on, did you intentionally falsify anything on your application?" And I go, "Okay." And he goes, "So what's that about? What are you not telling us?" And I said, I just started laughing. And I go, "Well, if I didn't intentionally falsify anything about my drug use history or my criminal history or my job or background history, I don't know what I would be intentionally falsifying on the job application portion. Those are the big hitting items. So I don't know what I would have what else I would have. So something isn't connecting here. So I don't know if that actually happened and he was just kind of seeing how I was going to respond to that, or if it did actually come back inconclusive." And he goes, "Okay, well, let me have some conversations and I'll call you back." And he calls back and he goes, "Yeah, we're going to go ahead and we're going to push you through." And the funny thing about it was, they must have just been hungry for people, because I go through the physical portion and I'm going through the line, and I come to the colorblind test the gal's issuing. And I already know that I'm colorblind. And so, of course, I fail it miserably. And she goes, "Yeah, you're not passing this and you can't be colorblind." And she was like, "I'm going to push you through anyways." And so she pushes me through. And I'm thinking I won the lottery, right? So they give me the job and I come back home and I start making all the things, getting everything squared away to go. And I'm just going to go live with 2 friends that live down there. And the academy down there is like it's like boot camp. So, I got to shave my head, and before I went down there, so there was this whole thing with my friends shaving my head and doing all this, and it's not just like a little buzz cut, like it's like big. And so I do all that. I go down there, and I get into the academy, and I go the first day. And we have to get there at like 5 a.m. or whatever it is, or 4 a.m. And they had all these different rules. You had to have a lock that you had to, for your locker. You had to have these shoes. You have to buy all your uniform, everything, your belt, your gun. And anybody that's been in law enforcement knows how expensive that stuff is. And keep in mind, I'm, a 21-year-old kid who doesn't have a dollar to his name. I'm broke. And so I went and got a credit card so I could put all this uniform stuff on the credit card. And so the first day I go through the academy, and it's drill sergeant style. I mean, you walk by the rule. If you walk by anybody in the hallway when you're walking, whether you're doing anything for the academy or you're going to the bathroom, whatever, no matter who it was, and there could be a line of 4 or 5 people coming through. Every person has to stop and like stand at attention and say, "Sir, Cadet Reimer, may I pass, sir?" And then it gets to the point where people are just waving you off because it's that annoying, and you're just like stopping and taking a step, stopping and and you're going through this whole process. And I remember they told us that we had to write our names on the back of our athletic shoes in big block letters. And I had just spent like $150 on these nice running shoes, and I'm like, I'm not fucking putting. Sorry, I can't know if I can say that.
No, you say whatever you want.
I'm not in permanent marker writing my name on the back of these nice ass. I don't, I'm broke. Like I'm going into debt to get this job. And I was so stressed out and nervous that I didn't memorize my locker combination. So I kept the sticker on the back of the lock. So we're going through this whole thing, and it's just a rigmarole of push-ups, and and then this classroom portion. So they're like, all right, it's chow time. You might have 5 minutes to eat. You might have 30 minutes to eat. You don't know. So you better just go and eat. So everybody's just in there just shoveling shit in their mouth, right? And these guys are yelling at you as they're walking around. And then it's all of a sudden like 10 minutes later, shower time. So, because we're all in PT gear. So they send us in the locker room, go take a shower. And it's this small shower. And keep in mind, there's a group size of like 50 or 60 of us dudes. And there's like 4 shower heads in this small little thing. And the shower heads are already turned on before we even walk into the locker room. And it's turned on in scorching hot water. You're not showering. You're going and just doing this, and then because they're coming in yelling, and they're yelling at you to hurry up, and they have these like Class A uniforms we have to put on with the tie, and our shoes had to be shined a specific way, like mirrors. I mean, it was literally boot camp. So I'm thinking, all right, I'm gonna keep a sticker on the back of my lock. That's one thing I don't have to worry about. Like, I don't have to memorize the stamp locker combination. I'm doing all this and da-da-da-da. So I get through the first day, finally, get showered and all that. Well, I come back to my locker. I have one my locker door's open. Well, because I didn't take the sticker off, they had sent people in there because clearly I'm not the first person to think of how I'm going to shortcut this system. And so my shit is strung everywhere, all over the locker room, wet, all that stuff. And they threw away one of my shoes. So I've got one athletic shoe. And I'm in a town where I just moved here, and I'm broke. And I'm like, oh my gosh, okay. So then I get homework because I didn't lock my lock, or I left the combination on there, and I didn't write my name on the back of my shoe, and that's why they threw it away, because they didn't know whose shoe it was. So they threw one away. So they made me write an essay. I had to write an essay on why it was important to put my name on the back of my stuff. And it was a specific sentence that I had to write over and over, and it was a 500-word essay. And it had to be, because back then, reports were handwritten. It had to be in block letters. Well, I don't know if you've ever tried to write a 500-page or a 500-word report in block letters. It takes forever. So I had that report, and then I had another one on why it was important to lock my locker. I need to lock my locker because I don't want to lose my stuff. I don't remember what the sentence was. So I get home at 6 or 7, or probably 7 or 8 o'clock. We've got to be back at 4 a.m. I'm writing these reports till 1 o'clock in the morning. My hand's cramping. I'm like going through this whole process. And then I'm struggling because my kid's back at home too. I had the baby, and I was like, I just don't know if I can do this. And so I went back in that second day, and I told him, I said, no. I said, I'm out. This isn't for me.
Mm. How old were you when you did that?
I was 21.
Okay.
Yeah, I was 21 years old.
Okay. So you come home, and I'm assuming you're still applying, and eventually you get a job with Nampa PD.
Yep. I applied for Nampa PD, and I applied for Boise PD, and I interviewed with both at the same time.
Okay.
And did the oral board. Got to the oral board portion with Boise PD, and I remember the gal. I think she was the human resources gal. She was grilling me about the Albuquerque experience on why I left. How I'd started and I left so soon, and da 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 da. Come to find out, through having friends that worked inside the investigations unit and stuff, that did backgrounds and stuff like that, it was her, and she had said that I didn't have what it take. She didn't believe I had what it took to make it in law enforcement. But I had accepted the job with Nampa already anyways, because they offered me the position.
Got it. So how old are you? Are you 21 when you start with Nampa?
No, at this point, because I had to wait the time frame, to get in. So 2006, I was 26, almost 27. Okay.
So I'm assuming that the post experience is much different than what you had to deal with down in Albuquerque.
1,000% different. I mean, there was aspects of, the high pressure type situation and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. But at Nampa, you go through you start the FTO process and the training process on the streets before you even go to the academy.
Okay.
And so by the time I had even gone to the academy, I was already almost finished. No, I think I finished my FTO process, all phases of it. So when I went to the academy was a breeze.
Yeah, and I'm assuming you're home, you got a couple of years of experience, just being a little wiser, a little more mature. So it's got to be easier. So you get through the whole process, you get through post, you're on patrol, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how is it? I mean, you start, you're running patrol for the first time. How is it being out there?
I love not having somebody else in the car, a trainer in the car, but I hated patrol. It just wasn't. I that wasn't what I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to work dope. I wanted to work narcotics, and so that's what I did. I mean, I just focused all my attention on that. Aside from whatever call load that I had to do, um, I mean, it was fine. I mean, you enjoy the high intensity, foot chases and pursuits and all that stuff, and that was cool. But I just worked dope houses, and I would put together briefs and files and pass them off to the dope unit and say, hey, here's intel. I mean, I was reporting everything, license, you're just going through everything and saying, hey, here you go. Because I would ask them, hey, any dope houses you want me to pay attention to, anything like that, and I would do that. And then I would even ask the department sometimes, hey, can I get an undercover car since we're slow, and just so I can go out and sit surveillance and not sit in a patrol unit. Because I just wanted to take a proactive approach. So when those positions just didn't open up very often in the narcotics unit, so that when they did open up, I could say, yeah, this is what I've been doing to prepare myself for this position. And that took about 2 years.
So you made detective in 2 years?
Mm-hmm.
How is that? I mean, was that typically fast, or was that about normal?
It's not normal. I say that twofold because there was somebody else ahead of me that had made detective, and they made it pretty quick, but they were bilingual, and so they needed a Spanish speaker, and so it kind of just fit for them for undercover stuff, and that's why they morphed them into that. But as a general rule of thumb, 2 years into patrol before you make detective, no, that's not normal at all. Those are coveted positions.
So what are you working on then? You're in the dope unit. Give me an idea of what type of cases that you're working at Nampa PD. What level, what type of drugs, etc.
Dope is like cells, and when you're trying to make cells and you're in the beginning, you will swing at every little thing that you can. I mean, you have to establish rapport and reputation and relationships with the patrol guys so that they call you when things pop up when you're not there, because they're really the key to it. And then you take, if something filters in, we get drug tips that would come in. And so I got a lot of the low level drug tips and a lot of the low level, drug arrests. And I would go in and start trying to do those interviews and start working that stuff. So it was just baby stuff.
Did you have any significant cases that you worked on that kind of made an impact on you personally?
Oh man. I can't say that I had any. I mean, I guess you'd have to elaborate more as far as an impact on me personally.
Well, I mean, so for example, and I obviously realize you weren't on patrol a whole bunch, and so maybe this pertains more to the narcotics unit. But I talked to other guys, and they're like, "Man, I had this car accident, or I came across this kid that was, died in a swimming pool." And either positive or negative. I just was wondering if there's anything that happened during the time, specifically when you were a detective, that kind of stood out, like, wow, I can't believe this is happening, or, and maybe there wasn't, because, dope is just case after case after case. And so nothing really is, maybe nothing really did stick out to you, but that was kind of the overall question.
The thing that I took away from dope, and I think this is probably the benefit of getting into it so early instead of staying in patrol for, a significant amount of time, is I learned real quick that the world isn't black and white. Drug dealers, drug users, the drug world, crime, it's not cut and dry. It's not, well, you did it and you shouldn't have done it and now you're going to jail for it. When you work dope, especially when you are working with a lot of different informants and sources, and if you do some undercover stuff, you start to realize the human element in all of this. And you realize that there's a lot of gray area. It's not what you just, from an outsider's perspective, they see XYZ and that means this should happen. When you're in it, it's not that cut and dry, you know. So that was my biggest takeaway from working it.
So was there ever a time, because I know at some point you and I start working together, are you a task force officer? Do you become deputized over at DEA?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Was there ever a time that as you're doing narcotics work that you think about maybe going to a federal agency?
I did think about it. I did. So I had talked to Bill Lutz had been pushing me for a while after I'd been in the task force for a few years. Because I think I worked just as a detective for about 6 years, and then the other task force officer ended up leaving to promote or something, and so then I came in and took over his spot. And after working a couple cases and whatnot, then obviously his goal is to try to push people into the DEA.
Mm-hmm.
And I had kind of started that process, but I was a lot older and wiser at this point, and I knew that going down that road, more than likely, the placement was not going to be something ideal. It was going to be something like New York or around the border, or, El Paso, something like that. And I just didn't want to make that move.
Right.
I just didn't want that life.
Right.
So.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about your career, Matt, because ultimately you end up you stop working for Nampa PD in 2020. And there was a lot of stuff that was going on at the time. Even with cases that you and I were working on. Can you talk a little bit about the political negativity that was happening within your department that might have contributed to you actually leaving?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the thing that, unless people don't actually do the job,
Mm-hmm.
what they don't realize is politics is a massive portion of law enforcement. And the problem with that is, the chief is beholden to the mayor. And just like in any other political organization, when something changes over, whether it be a mayor, a president, or whatever, a CEO even, they want to bring their people in to those positions of power under them to execute whatever mission that they're trying to put out there. And we had a lot of turnover in chiefs in Nampa during my career. I think when I in my almost 15 years there, we had 5 or 6 different chiefs. And the last chief that took over, who was ironically the sergeant of the narc unit that hired me coming into it, all of a sudden there was this, okay, let me back up. So after the financial crisis in 2008, Nampa PD had a really large gang unit. Our narc unit had grown. We had just gotten into a new facility, and the downturn, they started to cut financial stuff. And what happened was they cut the gang unit out, and there were corporals and people in that unit at that time, and they got put back on patrol. Well, some of us didn't get put back on patrol. Some of us got to stay in the narc unit. And just like in an organization, sometimes that creates jealousy. And so then kind of the beginning of the end, well, there were several things that contributed to it. And I don't know exactly what it is. It comes down to, and that this is why I always equate police departments to like high school. Whether if you're liked, you're good. If you're not liked, you're not good. And I was just never an ass kisser. I had this rose-colored vision that if I just did good work and did a lot of work and produced, that would speak for itself and I would be left alone. Well, that just wasn't the case. And so the new chief had come in, promoted some people of his own into positions of power, a lieutenant, and happens to be that one of those lieutenants was one of the people that was removed from the narc unit with the downturn. And they're all looking at going, well, why am I being removed and why isn't he being removed? But I don't know all this stuff is going on behind the scenes. I'm just not aware of all of it. And all of a sudden, the philosophy had changed that they wanted a rotation in the narcotics unit. They didn't want people in that unit for too long. But then there were several little things that had occurred. Unbeknownst to me, I find out that there has been some informal IA investigations that have been occurring into me. And I say informal, and I can't even really necessarily call them IA investigations, albeit IA was the one that was doing these investigations. I didn't know about some of them. The first one that had come in, there was an accusation that came in that I had somebody had anonymously complained saying I had a relationship with a female informant. And if I learned anything in narcotics from a few of my mentors, I mean, some people that I, to this day have the utmost respect for, like Chad Shepard, he told me to document everything. Don't delete anything. You don't delete your text messages. You don't ever meet with a female informant one-on-one alone, unless you're at the department in a video recorded, environment. And I took all that to heart. And after you get seasoned enough in that world, I could start foreseeing issues before they would even occur. And I remember this specific instance. I was meeting at the police department with this female, and she was actually going to be the informant because her criminal history allowed for her to be the informant, but she was going to help her boyfriend get some credit for his charges. And I remember sitting in the room with him, and I just was getting the read on the guy. And after I come through and she's providing all the intel to me and all that, I looked at him and I said, okay, I just need to make sure that you and I aren't going to have an issue here. And he goes, well, what do you mean? And I said, I need you to understand something. Her and I are going to be texting and communicating. Maybe it's at 5:00 in the afternoon. Maybe it's at 10:00 at night. If she sends me something where she's in a place or she sees something, she's going to text me. And I said, I need you to understand that this is business. She's helping you. I don't need any jealous boyfriend nonsense. I said, I'm not going to be communicating with you about stuff because you are not the informant. I can't trust that you're not going to share information. Now, if she shares stuff with you, that's on her. But her and I said, I just need you to make sure that you understand that. Well, lo and behold, she had gotten pissed off, or he had gotten pissed off or whatever. And I assume it was him that had called. And, but I had all my documentation when they asked me about it. Right. Mm-hmm. And by this time now, there's rumblings, where you can just kind of hear things where, you feel like management may be targeting you, or, they're definitely they don't like you for whatever reason. And we at Nampa PD, we had a program called Blue Team. And Blue Team was designed to be a documentation program for supervisors to document whatever issues for coaching, rooms for areas for improvement, yada, yada, yada. But the problem with Blue Team was they could put stuff, and this is different than your employee file. They could put stuff in Blue Team, but the person that they were putting that file in, didn't have to know about it and didn't have to sign off on anything or anything like that. So I go into IA. I'm starting to get wise to everything. So now I'm kind of putting my ducks in a row and I'm kind of going, okay, I'm seeing little things here that are evidently clear to me that they're trying to push me out of the narcotics unit, want to put me back on patrol because they think I've been in narcotics for too long. Because now we're going on a decade that I've been in narcotics. And and at the same time, I was getting pushed out of the task force officer position. What I was being told was I wasn't producing, but I really knew that it was that a bilingual detective was retiring and they wanted another bilingual detective that worked at my department in that position.
In the task force.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know, in that particular case, Matt, do you know if it was DEA? Was it the DEA supervisor or the Nampa supervisor that wanted that change?
It was 100% the DEA supervisor, and I think another thing that played into that role was there was a very well known sergeant that had been in the task force for DEA for a very long time, and I called him out on the office in front of everybody, and it pissed him off, and he went to he I think that he played a role, and I don't know that for sure, but the writing was on the wall. Now, I will say, on the tail end of my task force officer position, I was burnt out. I was fried, and I wasn't producing. And this was actually a blessing in disguise. I didn't look at it at the time, but it really was. And whatever reason that Bill made that decision to move on from me and pull me out, I see his side. His job is to try to recruit new actual DEA agents. And so you start kind of recycling some of those guys that come in. And he made the right decision. I just don't like the way that he went about it. I don't like the way that he communicated it to me, and I don't like the fact that I was blindsided by it. But anyways, in we get through that. They pull me out of the task force and then put me in back in just working in detectives in the narcotics unit. But at the same time, there were some other things that were going on where this is where I kind of knew it was the beginning of the end for me in narcotics. They started making me teach classes. They started making me be more out there in the public. I was very cognizant the entire time I was in narcotics, no matter whether we went to a search warrant or whatever it was, that I protected my identity. I didn't have social media or anything like that. I wore a balaclava when I was out in public, even though I wasn't even doing a ton of undercover work. I was doing mainly casework, and they made me teach a narcotics class to the general public. It was an open house at the department, the new facility, and generally the people that come through that are good people. They're just interested in what's going on. And so I had taught the class. Unbeknownst to me, there was an administrator in the back doing a Facebook Live video at the same time. Well, ironically, a target of mine, and this is as I was right before I'd come out of the DEA, he was watching the Facebook Live video, just doing his own intel. And this was a DEA target that we were working that had cartel organizational ties, and it was a big case that I was trying to put together. And I'm sitting surveillance on his house, and this is again right towards the end of the whole DEA thing. This was right after I'd been pulled out, and then the other guy had been put back in. I'm about a mile down from his house, and he gets out and comes up to my truck, drives up to my truck, gets out, knocks on my window, asks what I'm doing there, and I give many of the standard answers that we may or may not give, which I'm not going to say on this, but anybody that's done it knows what they say when that happens. And he looks at me and he goes, "No, I know who you are." And he turns around and he gets back in his truck. And this is a Hispanic dude. I've never met him in my life. He doesn't know me from Adam. And I'm like, that's weird, because that had never happened. So anyways, at the same time I'm dealing with, they had put some new supervisors in the narcotics unit, the new chief, and there was definitely issues. There was issues. My corporal was one of the narcotics guys that had gotten pulled out of the narcotics unit in '08, and he felt like he got slighted. He felt like it was a racial thing because he was a Hispanic guy, and he was actually the guy that was ahead of me that had gotten into narcotics really, really fast, and he was a great detective. But for whatever reason, I was a target of that, his animosity when it came to a lot of that stuff. I mean, it was stupid shit. He was mad that I got a new dope vehicle before he got one, and he had been in the unit longer. I mean, it was just it was, and this is why I say it's childish high school bullshit, because this stuff gets carried, and when these new chiefs come in and they promote these other guys who were equals with you, now they're your supervisor. They don't forget whatever issues you may or may not have had between each other. They carry that up there, and then they start leveraging it and using it and holding it over your head now that they're your boss. And he was doing everything he could to make my life as miserable as possible in this unit. So I was already looking to get out of that. And I knew the writing was on. I went and got my real estate license, started trying to figure out, okay, what do I want to do when this all comes to fruition and comes to a head? So the next thing I do is I go into the IA's office, and I said, hey, I want to see my blue team file. And he kind of was like surprised, because nobody ever did that. People asked for their employee file, but I didn't give a shit about that, because that stuff, I mean, I'm signing off on what's going on there. I want to see the blue team file. So he pulls it up, and I see all these different names of people that work in my unit and these interviews that had occurred, and these different informal non-IA investigations. And I'm like, okay, now this has coincided with backtracking to the guy that had come up to my truck and said he knew who I was. So at the time I was dating a defense attorney in Boise. Out of the blue, I get a call from her, and we were together for about a year, and that's important, because this wasn't some fly by night thing, which will make sense later when I talk about the IA investigations. She calls me and she says, I don't know how to tell you this, but one of my clients just walked in, and he's like, I've got these pictures on my phone that were sent to me from the people that he was working for, who were paying for his legal expenses. And it's pictures of this detective's kids in his house. And they're saying that if anything happens to anybody in their organization, that they'll go after his kids, and they can track them through their football schedules. Because also at the time, I owned a football training company. And this is, again, why I didn't have social media, why I protected my identity so well, and why I was so cognizant of that. So we were a heavy football family. My oldest was a freshman at Rocky and was playing football for Rocky. And then also this 7-on-7 organization. And it was a big 7-on-7 organization. I mean, we would flow in, a couple hundred kids a year through this program. And she goes, it's pictures of Brendan and Caden, and he's got pictures of your house. And I'm like, okay. So at this point, I'm obviously out of the task force. I'm still in detectives, but I'm like right on the tail end at this point. And so they're going through that whole process, and they're getting ready to, I can tell that eventually they just pull me out of dope. They say it's for my safety. They pull me out of dope, put me on patrol because of all this stuff. So then I'm looking at the investigations, and I go, okay, well, what's this one? And it was, somebody had made an accusation that you were doing real estate work on duty. And so that's what this is all about. And I go, okay. Now keep in mind, I had my real estate license. I sold one house. I had one listing I had one listing or two listings my entire time that I had my real estate license. I wasn't doing anything on real estate. I was working full time at Nampa, and I had my real estate license, and I'm like, okay, where did this come from? Well, and I don't know where it came from because it never said any of that stuff. But I also knew that there was a corporal that didn't like me in my own unit that was working on an agenda to push me out of the unit. And it was like they were trying to find whatever they could. And then I see the investigation. Obviously, I see the CIA investigation about the inappropriate relationship, which come back completely unfounded because I had all the documentation to prove it. And they knew it was BS when they saw it, and they were like, "Okay, we're good to go on that. That's closed out." And obviously, the working on duty thing got. But see, nobody ever talked to me about any of this stuff until that. And um, I'm like, okay, obviously, I mean, I'm not on my computer, and they'd be able to tell what I was if I was doing that type of stuff on duty or whatever it was. And so, but then I see another one, and it was an inappropriate relationship, basically questioning my relationship with my girlfriend at the time, the defense attorney, and that I was. They were almost accusing me of like sharing information or commingling information because this random guy came in, because now they're looking into all this stuff, why these people have my pictures, da 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 da, right? And it was so bad at that point. What we had to do was, I mean, we had to pull Caden out of Rocky and put him in Meridian High School, enroll him in Meridian High School, change his name on the roster to a fake name so that when he was making plays, that nobody would say that the announcer wouldn't say Caden Reimer. And but the department wasn't offering anything. They weren't doing anything. They didn't. The chief never spoke. Joe Huff never spoke to me about any of it. Never apologized. Never asked me if I needed anything. Carmen, the administrator for dispatch, who took the stupid Facebook Live video, because that's how that guy recognized me. He was watching it. He saw me sitting on the road. That's where he was putting all this together and got my name and identity and all that stuff. And obviously he knew what he was into. And so, unbeknownst to me, he saw me on the Facebook Live video when he came up to my truck, and I gave him the excuse that I gave him as to why I was sitting there. But never spoke with Carmen, not an apology, not, hey, my bad, nothing. And I had a great relationship with her at the time too. And so I'm feeling slighted and pissed off at this point. And I'm like, hey, not for nothing, but do you guys think you might pay for some video cameras on my house? How about an alarm system? Okay, yeah, we'll do that. We'll pay for an alarm system for, I think they paid for the alarm system for like 2 months, and that was it. Or, maybe it was 6 months. I don't remember what it was. But I had to ask for all of these things. Put the cameras up. I mean, I had videos of, somebody coming up and checking the hood of my undercover truck at 3:00 in the morning just to see if it was warm and walking away.
No shit.
Yeah. I mean, we sent it out. I'm like, hey, here's this video I just got after I put this in. And so I'm like, you would think that after, at this point, it was probably, I'm 12 years in or whatever, that they're going to do something. You would, just maybe even a phone call from the chief. I mean, we're talking about a department that's 125, 130 sworn.
Yeah.
We're not massive. We're not a massive conglomerate.
Right.
And the chief can't pick up the phone and just say, hey, how you doing? Need anything? And I'm the one doing all this stuff in the background, having to reorganize my family life, move my kid from high school, and do all this stuff. And so I was like, all right, we're just a number. And so then I see the investigation, going back to the investigation, the IA investigation. I say, well, actually, I take back that third one. I hadn't even seen that one yet. No, that's right. I did see that third one, but I had started calling people about the other ones that were in there because I was like, I'd called my old sergeant about the employment while working on duty, another job on duty or whatever. And I called him and I said, were you asked about this? He goes, yeah. And he had actually called and kind of warned me. He's like, then this is how I kind of started putting some of this stuff together. He goes, hey, you need to watch your back. Somebody in administration is coming for you. And I was like, what are you talking about? And this is what spurred the blue team file. He goes, yeah, I got a call about you working real estate on duty or whatever. And it's like, I was like, really? And he's like, yeah. And so then I go through that. They're like, well, you just didn't get pre-approval from the chief to have secondary employment, because that's in policy. To have secondary employment, you have to have pre-approval from the chief. And I'm like, I'm not employed by anybody. I'm a real estate agent. I just went and got my real estate license. Like, I'm not, nobody pays me unless I do something. Like, nobody, there's no salary, no benefits. Like, this is a side hustle. But okay, here's my request, my formal request, so that I can be a real estate agent, even though I'm not really actually doing any real estate. So then, but the third one was the kicker. It was the accusation of my relationship with this defense attorney at the time, basically being inappropriate, and an inappropriate relationship with a confidential informant or a suspect for a case. And I didn't know any of this stuff. I mean, at this point, I mean, I still don't know if that dude walked into her office randomly or not, but I find it hard to believe that this guy that had pictures of my kids happens to walk randomly into the one defense attorney in Boise that I'm dating. Like, what are the odds of that? And then shows her the pictures. And so I see all these interviews about, and they're interviews about my relationship with this attorney. And they had interviewed everybody in my narcotics unit.
Did you know?
No. Not one person told me. Not one person gave me a heads up. They never asked me or interviewed me about my relationship with this attorney. They never called her. And so my response, and I remember it vividly to the IA guy, was, so let me get this straight. You guys interview everybody under the sun about a personal romantic relationship that I have with somebody, except for the two people in it. And you don't tell me? And he goes, well, yeah, I can see how that might seem like bullshit to you. We didn't interview her because we figured she wouldn't talk to us. And I laughed and I said, she wouldn't have talked to you guys because she hates cops. But I said, you know, Angel Calderon is not a friend of mine. I don't discuss my personal life with anybody in that unit or anybody at work for that matter. So what in the hell do you think they're going to have to offer on my relationship status with this attorney? They don't know anything. And so I knew that I knew what was going on, and I was at wit's end. I was stressed. I was maxed. I mean, I was just miserable. And so I went back to patrol because I just could not fight it anymore. I just couldn't. And they pulled me out because they used this guy getting my pictures and stuff as an excuse. And it was fine. Whatever. It is what it is. I was still kind of just looking. And I remember going into Kurt Schenkel's office, who is the deputy chief, one of them, and whom of which I had a great relationship with, I thought. As a matter of fact, you backtrack to when I got back in, when I first started in narcotics, the now chief, Joe Huff, Kurt Schenkel, and another guy became the IA unit. They moved into the IA unit from their positions. And they had a whole blow up with the chief at that time. They ended up all getting fired and suing the department and going through all this bullshit. And Kurt called me at the time and had asked me, he said, hey, you know what's going on? And I was like, yeah. And he was my first sergeant. I had a tremendous amount of respect for him. And he goes, can I use you as a reference for applying for other jobs, other law enforcement jobs? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. So now fast forward to all this stuff. He's in this deputy chief position, and I get put back on patrol, and I went in and talked to him about all these investigations. And I tell him, everything I just told you, and I go through it, and I looked at him and I said, I got nothing to hide. I've never done anything wrong or illegal. And they all came back unfounded, by the way. Every single one of them. There's not a negative thing in my employee file if you look to it today. There's letters of commendation, all that, but I was never written up for anything my entire career. There's not one formal write-up or anything, not a counseling statement. I said, we all screw up. I mean, if you look hard enough, you'll find something. I'm sure I stole a pen or, something like that. I said, but nothing that would ever warrant or jeopardize my career or my job. And I just looked at him and I said, I'm just going to be honest with you right now. I said, if there's one more unwarranted non-IA investigation, as you guys like to call it, into me, I'm going to sue the shit out of you, and I'm going to sue the shit out of this department. And I'm going to sue the shit out of the city. And I said, and I'll win, Kurt. And he goes, oh yeah, why do you think that? And I said, because I'm smarter than you. And I'm not doing anything wrong. I cover my tracks as far as I make sure that I follow policy and procedure to the letter. I do what I'm supposed to do. I'm not here to steal money from the taxpayers. And I just want to go home. That's it. I want to be left alone. And that was the end. I mean, I put in, a couple years of patrol to finish off. And while I was trying to find out what I wanted to do, and that's what I did.
All right. I've got a bunch of questions for you, Matt, because, you and I obviously work together, right? Mm-hmm. And I always found you very smart, very hardworking. And I didn't know any of this stuff was going on. So a couple questions for you, which I find very interesting. So you said that they were interviewing everybody in your narcotics unit. So I knew everybody in the narcotics unit. I liked them all. They were all good guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what I find interesting is, like, if you and I were working together and somebody came to me and started asking me about you, and you and I were friends and we had that close relationship working, I would immediately tell you. And nobody came to you. What do you think that was all about? Because, I mean, I knew all those guys. Do you think they're being threatened? Don't say anything? Or why isn't anybody saying anything to you?
Because I don't think I think it was a couple reasons. I think that they didn't understand the gravity or the scope of everything.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was self-preservation, because it became this whole, I equate it back to like those old Caesars and kings. It's like everybody's scheming and squabbling and they're trying to jockey for positions of power, and people just wanted to keep their jobs in the unit. They were, they were willing to either kiss ass or do something that they normally wouldn't have done to save their own ass. But at the end of the day, because I only called one of them out on it. Because the other ones, I just didn't care. I didn't have the relationship with them,
mm-hmm.
and it didn't matter to me. But there was one that hurt. And I said something to him, and I go, if it was something that was going to affect your job, if you were violating policy, if it was going to violate policy or procedure or anything like that, I said, I would never ask you to do that. But that's not what this was. And I said, and not for nothing else, like, you could have just given me a heads up. And he apologized and he goes, I should have. And I said, yeah, you should have. But what was done was done.
What's interesting is you're telling me the story. And look, I've gone through, I don't know, your interview will be episode like 43, right? And it's given me a very different perspective. Not different perspective, because I've seen some of this bullshit happen in other departments. Not to the extent that you're telling me at all, right? But it's a very interesting story that you're telling me. And for me, I'm putting two and two together, because there was another guy that was in your department, narcotics detective, who came over to DEA. And I don't necessarily know if it was your department who kind of put the kibosh on him, but he got booted out of our, and I thought, what the hell's going on? This guy's a pretty good detective.
Mm-hmm.
What, I mean, he works hard and everything else. And so now that you're telling me these stories, do you think Do you think, like, for example, one of my interviews I do is with Tracy Bastrachea, Chief of Police in Meridian. I cannot imagine, maybe I'm wrong, but I can't imagine this bullshit happening under Meridian PD. Do you have an opinion about that?
I can tell you, when you start looking at it from, um, I mean, Tracy he's a different, I don't get that read on him. Like, I don't get the politician read on him. I mean, I get, obviously he has to do a little bit of that because he's the head of an organization, but Joe Huff is a snake. He's a consummate politician. And if you were to take a straw poll in that department, they all know that he says one thing and then does another and plays the I didn't know card. And that was the card that Schenkel tried to play for him when it came to these unwarranted IA investigations. Because, I mean, you're a deputy chief and you have a line guy coming in. And what I said to him, that is word for word verbatim what I said to him and how I said it to him. Because I just didn't have anything to lose. And I just didn't care, and he knew it. And I needed him to understand the gravity of it. But then he played it off like, well, Joe didn't know. Which I know is bogus, because the IA investigator that I was going to and getting all this stuff from, shortly thereafter, after I'd gotten pulled out and through all this stuff, he got pulled out of IA unexpectedly. And everybody in the department's kind of like, whoa, what happened here? How is this happening? He's now retired. And I went to him or he actually reached out to me, and I want to make it clear with the IA investigator that was in there at the time. I have a tremendous amount of respect for him, and I still to this day, because he got pulled out of IA, and he goes, I talked to his best friend about this too, and his best friend's kind of the one that kind of helped me put some of these pieces of the puzzle together. He finally told him no. They kept coming to him they were coming to him for him to keep digging into whatever they could try to find on me. And he was like, look, we have struck out not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 4 times here with this guy. He's not doing anything wrong. And he refused to do it anymore. And so they pulled him out. Now, there may have been other things that have played into it that I have no idea about, that I wasn't privy to. But according to him and another supervisor that was really good friends with him, they pulled him out because he was like, I'm not going to continue trying to railroad this guy for you guys. You're using IA as an arm to just try to get rid of people that you don't want around for whatever reason, that you don't like, whatever it is. And I was I'm a vocal person. You know that. I speak my mind. I don't sugarcoat it for people. You know where you stand with me, and I'm direct. And some people that rubs the wrong way, but I don't really care, because at least you know where I stand. And they pulled him out because he refused to do any more of those bullshit investigations. So I don't backtrack to your question. I don't know why anybody else didn't come into the unit, because it wasn't like I had conflict with people or anything like that. I don't know. I know one thing. I was really good at what I did. And I was really good at what I did, especially when I was at DEA.
Well, just let me interrupt you, because I can 100% vouch for what you're saying, because you were very good at what you did. We did at least one of the cases we did was one of the biggest cases I did, which I think says a lot, and certainly couldn't have done most of that case without you. And I'll also say this: knowing how stressed you were at the end, frankly, I'm glad you got out. I'm glad, because I certainly couldn't see you doing another 10 years or whatever you had to retire and not being one of those completely bitter officers at the end going, screw this department. I hate these guys. I hate law enforcement. I hate all this. Um, so yeah, that's my 2 cents. Let me ask you about something. We talked a little bit about this before we began. And I want to just get your perspective on this because we're talking about stuff that I haven't really chatted with anybody else with. And part of it is because you and I work cases together and everything else, I can ask you this. And because we saw some of the bullshit, for lack of a better term, that was going on. What's your take? Do you have an opinion about competition, for lack of a better term, between law enforcement agencies, detectives in general, when working on a case?
I think that's I do. I mean, I have several opinions on it. When it comes down to it, I mean, you get a bunch of type A personalities in a room with an ego. Um, you're going to have conflict, and there's whatever people's motivations are for it. Um, a lot of people just want the credit. They just want the credit. They want the attaboys, and um, and as you know, or anybody else that's done that job, when you're working large scale investigations, there's not those don't come around a bunch. I mean, and it takes a long time to cultivate those, and so you put a lot of work and effort into those things, and um, but it can derail an investigation like that. Sometimes it can derail it before they even get started because there's just this influx of competition and fighting, and you got too many chiefs and not enough Indians. Nobody wants to just be the worker guy. Somebody wants to be the main guy and get the credit and all that. And you probably, I mean, I don't know to the extent on the federal side, as much as I do on our side, because we would get that competition within between departments. But I mean, we would see it time and time again between the federal, between FBI and DEA, or you know ATF even, and it's all of a sudden you start seeing these organizations that were created to investigate specific lines because you're trying to specialize, and you're having, you know, ATF, because they can't find a bunch of gun cases, trying to railroad their way into a drug case that may have a gun or two in it, but they just need it because they're trying to justify their job and positions too.
See, I didn't even mind that, Matt. I didn't, look, FBI, you want to write a drug case? I don't give a crap. I never cared about that. What bugged me is no matter if it was a federal agency, a federal agency, a federal agent, a state agency, or whatever else, it boggled my mind, especially for me, because it's not like I wasn't looking to get promoted. It's not like I get special awards. It's not like I get, whatever. I just wanted the people to go to jail. If you're doing something wrong, you go to jail. And it never ceases to boggle my mind when we'd sit in those freaking meetings and people would go, well, you just want the credit. No, I just want people to go to jail. What do I care? You can have the credit. I don't care. You want to write the affidavits? Go ahead. It just,
The thing that was always crazy to me about it, because my motivation, I mean, in my 6 or 7 years in DEA, I averaged a federal wire investigation once a year, which you know as well as I do how long it takes to cultivate those and build those. That's a lot. That's more than any other task force officer did in my time there and before me also when it came to federal wiretap investigations. And I mean, I even was the first one to do a state narcotics wiretap investigation and got it funded by the federal government through DEA. But the workload wasn't the arrests for me. Like when I see those cases and I see, yeah, all these people arrested, or all these assets seized, or all these drugs seized, those are fruits of the labor. But that's not the workload. The workload is, and the good case officers, the ones that are really, really running good cases and they're doing a good job and they're doing it for the right reasons, you never see them. You never hear about them. You don't know about them. They're not on the podiums. They're not getting the attaboys. Sometimes they do, but they're just in a group, you know. because it's so much work, it's so much paperwork, and you run into roadblock after roadblock. You're exhausting all these investigative techniques to get to that ultimate wire investigation. And then once you're in it, they're doing what they do. They're dropping their phones, or and you're having to go through all those things, and that's the work. And you don't see that. And most people, and you know this as well as I do. I mean, I can look back at my time at DEA and look at the officers that were doing those wire investigations, and there was three. I mean, I mean, and and so you look back and you go, but and I get it. I told, and I'm not even knocking them for it, because it's that much work, and it takes that much away from your life, and the sacrifices that you have to make to actually be that guy is tremendous on your family, your personal life, your stress. And so people want the credit for all the stats that come at the end, but the system is set up and designed that way. You're almost pissing in the wind, because I mean, you look at it from the federal side of it and you go, and this is a drop in the bucket when it comes to the wasteful spending and the way the system is designed. But you guys are your ASACs, or not your ASACs, but what is the head of the Boise office? That's a
Well, it was the rack, and now
Rack.
we do have an ASAC
Okay.
here, but it was the rack at the time.
So his job is justified by major investigations, even if they're not even necessarily fruitful sometimes, because how that data gets manipulated.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy. But then, at the end of the year, they'd be like, all right, we have this much money left in the budget. You want some boots? What do you want? We have to spend this, because if we don't, then when we go for funding the next year to Congress, they're going to be like, well, you didn't spend all the money this last year, so you don't need that much more money this year. So we're not going to give it to you. So it's a game. And that's a small, obviously, drop in the bucket, but then you start looking at all the organizations that are doing that, and you're going, no wonder the system's broken. There's no benefit, or you get no value out of working together. Who gets the stat, whether it's FBI, DEA, ATF, Nampa PD? Does it really matter? Well, it matters to whoever's over at Capitol Hill or at City Council when they're measuring the chief. But if you got a dipshit up there that can't explain that and understand that, you understand what we're doing here. These guys are battling the drug dealers and, whatever crime syndicates that are going on. But now they're also battling with each other because nobody wants to share any information. We've got a system for DEA, we've got a system for FBI, and neither one of them talk to each other. We all have to call this one little phone number and say, hey, we're doing this thing, and hope that the other guy at the other organization also puts that name in there, and it conflicts. And then you got to hope that somebody's going to call each other and have a conversation.
I'm glad you figured it all out, Matt. with the brief time that you were over at DEA, because that is 1,000,000% correct. Okay, let me start to wrap this up. So, man, you're so right. Okay, let me start to wrap this up. So, how long were you in law enforcement?
Almost 15 years.
Okay, so almost 15 years. In that time that you were in law enforcement, and especially with you in narcotics, because I know how narcotics is, did being in law enforcement take a toll on your family?
1,000%.
How so?
I mean, you're gone. You're gone. You have to live your life a specific way. Mainly the narcotics portion.
Yeah.
For me, especially with as many wire investigations that I was the actual case officer on, and doing that, when you're gone doing a takedown for 3 days, when you're not sleeping, you're carrying around all these phones, and you're taking phone calls at all hours of the night from informants, and it just takes a toll on you, and it wears you out. And so I will say that everything that happened, I'm glad that it happened. From the end result is that me actually leaving.
Yeah.
because I think that that's a big issue in law enforcement and organizations is I knew I was burnt out. I knew I didn't want to promote. I knew there was nowhere other units I wanted to go. I kind of half-ass attempted and applied to some other units, just basically trying to do anything I could to get out of patrol. Um,
Did you ever think about going to another department?
no,
How
I
come?
mean, I briefly consider it. I mean, even the BPD guys, the internal recruiters and stuff, they were constantly trying to do it, trying to bring me over. I didn't because it's no different. Nampa's no different than Boise. DEA is no different than FBI. It's all political, and you're trading one bag of shit for another bag of shit. And I say that tongue in cheek because there was a lot of the work that I loved, but if I was going to make the move to Boise, I was just going to be making the move for money.
Well, let me ask you this: minus the bullshit, obviously, that you went through. Did you enjoy your law enforcement career?
I did. I loved it, and I loved the work. And I got to do some cool ass shit.
Yeah.
I mean, I got to do some cool ass shit. I mean, I'm so grateful and thankful for the opportunities that I got to work in narcotics. I'm grateful and thankful to Bill Lutz for taking a shot at some young kid to come over and work at DEA. I'm grateful to you, John Aldine, those guys who took me under their wing and worked and did a lot of the work when they didn't want to do work because they were tired and burnt out, but they saw me out there just hungry and young. And I mean, getting to hang from helicopters, flying out of marijuana grows and stuff like that. I mean, I would never get to do any of that stuff anywhere else. So I'm super thankful
Yeah.
for all of those experiences.
Yeah.
And they've actually transitioned me into the sales career that I'm in now.
And I want to talk to you about that in a second, but let me just ask you one final question before we get to kind of what you're doing now, which is, did being in law enforcement affect the way that you see people in society over the course of your career?
It didn't affect the way that I see people in society over the course of my career because I already knew kind of coming in. I didn't see the world through rose-colored glasses because I had seen what I'd seen with my family with drugs and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
What I will say is, and then that goes on to the world's not black and white. There was a lot of informants that I worked with that I liked. I mean, I thought they were genuinely, I thought they were decent people. They made bad decisions, and they did shitty things sometimes, and they got themselves in bad situations and all that. But it wasn't as cut and dry as they sold the drugs and they should just go to jail or whatever it was. And so it actually gave me, but had I not gone into narcotics and I just worked a patrol life my entire career, I don't know that I would have had that same viewpoint. It would have, the world probably, maybe I would have been more jaded.
Mm-hmm.
And because I didn't have to experience a lot of like infant or child crimes and stuff like the things that gives you that PTSD.
Yeah.
And changes you. The dope world just made sense to me. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. It gave me perspective.
Yeah.
It helped build on the perspective that I already had.
Yeah.
And to this day, I carry that. But being a cop and being in law enforcement and being a detective, it was never my identity. That was the one thing that I learned from some old school dudes when I came in. And I learned going in too. I knew going in, you're never going to get back what you put into it. Ever. As long as you understand that whatever you're doing, you're just doing it for whatever you're trying to accomplish with yourself. And when you go home, you leave it at home. That's what I did. I lived it. And I got made fun of unmercifully for it. I mean, I wore black athletic shoes in patrol, Air Maxes, that I had painted all the logos off. And because I wouldn't run around clogging in boots. And I'm like, I'd rather be comfortable and be able to run fast than look cool. Like, it just didn't make, I didn't wear cargo pants and stuff when I was off duty. And sit in the back corner of the restaurant and scope out. And I just didn't, I shut it off when I was done.
Yeah.
And that, a lot of guys can't do that.
Yeah. No, it's actually pretty unusual. I mean, a lot of guys can't do that. So let's talk a little bit, just real briefly. What'd you decide to do? What are you doing now? Are you happy you did it? And I know the answer to this question, but did being in law enforcement, especially as a detective, help transition to you with what you're doing now?
Yeah. So I moved into commercial insurance sales of all things. I was at a buddy's house, a couple of players, my son, and I was coaching his son, and they were swimming in his pool in his backyard. And he's like, "So are you still looking to get out of law enforcement?" I said, "Yeah, I just haven't quite figured out what I want to do yet." And he goes, "Well, why don't you come work for the company I work for now?" And I said, "Sling Insurance?" And he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "It isn't glamorous, but it's residual, it's recession proof, and there's no cap on your income, and you get to pick your schedule." And I knew whatever I was going into, I wanted nothing to do with law enforcement, no security, no investigations. I didn't want to do anything like that, but I wanted something where I could control my own income and that I could pick my schedule because I was tired of being under a schedule. And and I knew that the next phase of my life wasn't going to necessarily focus on public service. It was going to be for my own personal and selfish desires and wants. So if I made that, and so when he said that, it just clicked. It just made sense to me. I was like, okay, yeah. And so I moved on. And ironically, it transitioned perfectly because when you're working in narcotics, it's sales. When you're a narcotics detective, it's sales. You are building relationships with departments, patrol guys, other people in the industry so that they call you versus calling another detective if they have, hey, I just made this traffic stop or I just talked to this person, whatever. And so you're cultivating that and you're building your pipeline for the entire next year. You're constantly building that because while you're working these cases to the end, you're still bringing in some other stuff and kind of cultivating, bringing that in. And you got to talk to people. You got to sit down and work with these informants. You got to help them come to a place where they trust you to share information with you. You got to be able to decipher the bullshit through the lies and the truth through the lies. And I mean, so it just was it really actually naturally transitioned to a point where I was like, okay, well, I've been doing sales for the past decade. And now I'm just not selling cases. I'm selling commercial insurance. I got to cultivate. I got to build my pipeline. I got to maintain relationships, and I got to be able to talk to different people in all walks of life. So,
You happy out of law enforcement?
oh, I wish I would have made the move 5 years sooner, in all honesty. And that is kind of a good way for me to kind of close this thing with you in the sense of, because I've said some things about some specific people that I don't like and I don't have a lot of respect for. And I've said things about people I do have respect, but they all played a role. And I thank all of them for them handling and forcing me down the path or riding the path the way that I rode it and finishing off my career. Because had they not done that, I don't know that, because you get comfortable and you don't want to take a risk and you don't want to, that's the problem with law enforcement guys want to get out of it, but they don't feel like they can do anything else. And I remember a year before I left, and I hadn't said anything. I wasn't like I was running around complaining and being negative at the department or anything like that. But I had a corporal, and I'll never forget this. I was probably a year and a half before I actually left the department. I parked outside to walk up into the department. He was sitting there in his car and walking up, and he goes, Reimer, and I went over to him, and he was always one of the guys that maybe gave me shit about my shoes and stuff like that. He's a tactical guy, but super smart. And he goes, "What are you doing?" And it was just out of the blue. Like there was no lead up conversation to this. Him and I did not discuss anything like this. And I go, "What do you mean?" And he goes, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "I'm working." And he goes, no, I get that, but why are you here? He goes, you're too smart for this. You don't belong. You don't want belong in this job anymore. He goes, everybody else here, most of these guys, he goes, they all want to go do something different, but they can't because this is all they know. He goes, there's you can be so much more than this. And he goes, I'm just telling you that because that's my read on you. And I didn't know the guy. I mean, that was the first time he'd ever met my supervisor. Keep in mind, I've been in narcotics for a decade. I never worked with this dude. And I was super appreciative of that just from the sense of because it helped kind of give me the courage to finally make that transition in that league because it was scary to walk away from it. Security, insurance, benefits, retirement, all that stuff,
Yeah.
So everybody played a role, and I'm thankful for even the negative stuff that happened because it led me to what I'm doing, and I love what I'm doing, and I haven't regretted one day after leaving. And I'm just like, I'm thankful for what I did, but I was done. I was out.
Yeah.
So,
Matt, thank you for the interview. Appreciate it.
yeah, thanks for having me.